the double standard, Chairperson. Let me say, Chairperson, that I find it very strange that when people stand up in support of Palestine, then all of those who are pro-Israel assume that that's the only thing they can talk about. I mean, we have a conference here about Palestine, Western Sahara, and Cuba. Okay? We could have added in Swaziland, we could have added in a whole range of other things, and I think most of us would agree. Most of us that support the Palestinian struggle would agree in supporting all of those things. Yes, I think that Palestinians are terribly treated in Lebanon, and many of us raise that issue constantly, that Palestinians in Lebanon, Palestinian refugees, are treated as second or third class citizens. That's not acceptable, okay? I also think that women are treated badly in South Place to talk about that. Accepted. So what's the point about that? Will this campaigning, we are asked, will it also target the Palestinian state if we should? Yes, any state that commits human rights abuses should be the target of all of us that believe in justice. Whether it's the Israeli state, a future Palestinian state, or indeed the South African state. And certainly many of us are very critical of the South African state as well. Anyone that commits human rights abuses should be the target of our vitriol and our anger all the time. Wherever there's oppression, we should stand up for it. There's no double standard, right? If you oppose oppression of Palestinians in Israel, you must oppose the oppression of people who are non-Muslim in Saudi Arabia, or women in Saudi Arabia, or you know, whichever country. If there is a double standard, then that is a problem. But I don't see the double standard among people that I look at around this room here. And really, I must, you know, this kind of propagandistic thing about 75% of Palestinians that will not live in a Palestinian state and will violently resist. I really don't know where these statistics come from, but they're really nonsensical statistics. And I can speak both in terms of surveys that have actually been done, as well as anecdotal evidence. This is nonsense. Palestinians, like all normal human beings, want self-determination. Palestinians want to be able to determine the future of their own lives. Palestinians are like fourth or fifth class citizens in that country. And don't tell me that they have the right to vote. So what? So-called Indians had the right to vote in South Africa under apartheid as well. That's got nothing to do with it. They are fourth or fifth class citizens, and they would really, like all human beings, want to have the control to make decisions over their own lives. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Martin and Naeem, for the responses. Now, I live up to my commitment. I say this side, so 1, 2, 3, 4. And please identify your name and the organization you come from.
Thank you, Comrade Chair. It's Mohammed Desai from PDS South Africa. Well, one question to Comrade Naeem and then another question to Comrade Marti. The one is that whilst I agree with Comrade Naeem that we should be responding to what the oppressed themselves have asked us for example, responding to the call for boycott, divestment, and sanctions. Comrade Naeem, you touched on how there's a legal obligation for us to internalize the Rome Statute. Is there, and I hope that we can consider this in preparation of the declaration, as well as where we're going to be going to from here, is there not also this obligation for the South African government to immediately end any sort of financial transactions and trade with the settlement enterprise, with the Israeli settlement enterprise? This is not, some may view it as a form of boycott, but in many ways it's just South Africa obligation that this conference should, is there not a need for this conference to take a resolution very clearly on the banning of all trade and financial transactions with the settlements, similar to what the European Union and several European countries in their own individual capacity have undertaken? And to Comrade Marti, I mean, Kairos, Southern Africa, together with so many different organizations, have called out Israeli policies to be a form of apartheid. I mean, many senior South Africans have done this as well. But isn't it time now that we do something about the fact? So consider taking, for example, the Human Sciences Research Council report from 2009 that found Israel guilty of apartheid and refer this report to, for example, the ICC, the United Nations, and other relevant international bodies such as the AU. It's about time that we actually do something with both the rhetoric on the ground in South Africa, but also the report that we've produced. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Next speaker. And again, I want to request that and remind that we are under pressure of time, dear.
Okay, right, all right. What I'm trying to say is that we cannot wait for government. We've waited long enough. We should, in a real sense, try and implement consumer boycotts, cultural boycotts, and finally the government should implement a total trade embargo on Israel. Because how else is anything going to happen? The same thing happened in apartheid, where they had economic sanctions, etc. We need to apply pressure. Now that pressure must come at grassroots level. Being part of the trade unions, you can mobilize your members and to boycott all Israeli goods on supermarket shelves. All right. Then the other part of it is the EU, the European Union, they are basically part and part responsible for the creation of Israel. They have, implemented a trade embargo on all goods manufactured on the West Bank by the Israeli companies, okay? But we need a total embargo. We need a diplomatic embargo and, of course, a trade embargo, and that will hit them hard, all right? Because if you go to the supermarket, you find Israeli goods all over the show. The other part of it is, oh yes, we need to inform the public at large, because most of the people walking in the street, they don't know where Palestine is. They don't know anything. Every Friday, we demonstrate in front of Parliament to counteract Zionist propaganda. And it is unreal that you find these people going into townships and actually assisting. Well, one guy admitted to me, I don't know where he came from, but he was a foreigner. He admitted to me they go into the townships, they help these people, and of course these people are demonstrating on behalf of an Israeli state. That is the Christian Zionists. So we need to counteract that also. Then, of course, the other Zionist propaganda, we need to make the people aware that the people at large, this is not a religious situation. This is the struggle of the Palestinian people is only to do with their own freedom. And it's not a religious situation. And most people think, oh yeah, the Bible says so and that type of thing. Well, it didn't happen that way, unfortunately, or fortunately. Oh yes, and about Palestinian workers. What the Palestinians can do for themselves. I mean, we talk it like, should they be free and independent, they will be able to develop their own economy. Currently, they can't even import goods without the consent of Israel. Recently, there was a sewage leak in Gaza. They couldn't get spare parts because of the blockade, that type of thing. And, of course, finally, recently, an Israeli minister said, oh, we don't want a Palestinian state that's controlled by Gaza, by the Iranians. Now, can you imagine such presumptuous, because they don't have a case, you see, so they have to bring all these presumptuous statements into the context. It's basically to move away from the real issue, to deviate the real issue from what in actual fact is happening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker.
Thank you, Comrade Chair. My name is Saifuddin Bester from Runners for the Freedom of Palestine. I want to comment on, actually, it just hit me now. A gentleman was sitting there, his name was Jan Kotze. I remember him from the Swap Stewart days when we worked for Sakau. He said something that time that I will never forget. He said, I'm a revolutionary, not a politician. What is a revolutionary? What's a politician? It is as if the more you become a politician, the less you can speak the pure truth. You see people coming in here, they don't have any affiliation. The less you are supported by money, whether it is from the Zionists or from anywhere, the more freely you can speak. Mr. Naim spoke about the ICC and the Rome Statute. This will never be implemented because we are living in a world where the law of the jungle applies. The government needs, and some of the government ministers came to us, they said, we need grassroots support. That is how, unfortunately, the fail side of politics. They need people to come all together, force them to do something, even if it's the right thing. I want to come to the BDS and, to comment on it. The BDS, Runners for the Freedom of Palestine, supports BDS big time. Really, if BDS phones us, we will do whatever. We will do whatever you want to do, because it works. And Zionists are terrified of it. But is BDS a substitution for the armed struggle? It is as if people speak about BDS and they say this works, as if armed struggle didn't work, as if armed struggle didn't liberate Lebanon, South Lebanon, kicked out of Gaza, as if it didn't work. So we are creating a perception of good Palestinian resistance and bad Palestinian. Any financial, so I can speak the truth, and I'll speak it here in this parliament. I say with investor, I support BDS fully, and I support Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah and the resistance of Hamas and of Fatah, of Hezbollah. I support BDS, and I call for reconciliation between Fatah, the PLO, and Hamas. This is the biggest threat to Palestinian activism, is sectarianism. I see members from the religious, the Christian community, the leaders, the real Christians, by the way, the followers of Christ, and not the antichrist Christians. I call on the people from the Muslim community to create an atmosphere of unity, because this is what is going to destroy Palestinian activism. I don't have to say, like the gentleman said, he started, when I run with the flag in Camps Bay, young Jews come to me. They say, we support Palestine, but I'm Jewish. Now, I don't know what I am, because 300 years ago, my great-grandfather came as Indonesian. He married Khoisan, and, I can't say I'm whatever. So I want to say I'm a human being. You understand?
Okay, thanks. From the next speaker. Sorry, you were the next. I'm moving according to the text. Yeah, then after you. Yeah.
Freya Dadu, Media Review Network. 20 years after Oslo, it's become quite clear it's become quite clear to most Palestinians and an increasing number of Israelis that the two-state solution is dead. 500,000 settlers are not going anywhere. Israel has certainly invested far too much time, money, and effort in establishing the settlement project. So they are not going anywhere. And far from halting settlement construction, Israel's accelerated it further. So what Palestinians actually have is a dismembered, besieged enclave, a place with major cities cut off from each other. The government is unable to control its own water, develop its agriculture. People crisscross checkpoints to get to work or school. This is not a state, it's a Bantustan. And my question is, as South Africa, and of course the world rejected Bantustans for us, can South Africa, of all countries, still be entertaining a Bantustan solution? Because a Bantustan is the only thing that the Israeli government is offering the Palestinians.
Thanks. The next.
Justice de Goede, I'm a member of the Portfolio Committee. I am a politician, but I do like to speak the truth. Chair, can I, let me boil down the essence of the debate this afternoon. What it's going to come down to is BDS or no BDS. This is what we're looking at. And here I'm a bit confused because I seem to have got slightly different messages on BDS. Mr. Naim Jena told us, and incidentally there have been some excellent inputs on this, he told us correctly that the three major components of the Palestinian body, Now, we also heard from, I believe it's a representative of the Palestinian embassy, that yes, Palestinians do want BDS. Now, perhaps the meeting can help me here and the speakers can help us. Who precisely wants BDS? How has that been expressed? Is it a common and universal theme among the Palestinians? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Member of Parliament. May we have the last speaker?
Honorable Chairperson, the Portfolio Committee, dignitaries and delegates, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to address this Portfolio Committee this afternoon. Let me start by introducing myself. I'm Corbin August. I'm part of the Palestine campaign in Cape Town, Stellenbosch, and I served as an ecumenical accompanier for 3 months, monitoring human rights violations in the occupied Palestinian territories. There's 4 of us here today: Marty Momberg, Terry Crawford Brown, and Carol Martin over there, who can attest to what I'm about to tell you. Now, my first point I would like to direct to those facts and figures, because of all the Palestinians that I spoke to in the checkpoints who were waiting 3, 4, even 6 hours to go to work, none of them said that they would prefer to stay in Israel as opposed to Palestine. Perhaps you've been there as well for so long.
Okay, I was referring to the Arab people living in Israel, in the state of Israel itself, not in the Palestinian territories. The survey has been done by them and questioning them. Overwhelmingly, they state they do not want to be part of a Palestinian state because they live better under Israeli government than ever. And certainly come to Israel later in the year and I'll do my own survey and I'll come back
Please do,
on that.
because what you're saying is not true. Next is an appeal to the Portfolio Committee and government. EAPPI is a fantastic program, and lately it's been struggling for funding, but it really exposes us to the realities in the West Bank and the hardships that the Palestinians are facing. Now, I don't want to take a swipe at government, but with corruption and mismanagement of funds being the order of the day in our Rainbow Nation, and with so much money being squandered in this country, I just want to ask, is it perhaps possible that we can make a way to find some funding for the program? Just something to look into. Comrade Naim, he also mentioned EAPPI as a very good place to start in witnessing what's actually going on. The third issue that I haven't heard anybody touch on today is the issue of the Bedouins in Palestine. The Israeli government wants to forcefully displace the Bedouins in the E1 area in the Jordan Valley towards Jericho. Now, these are vulnerable people, helpless, and they really need our support. What happens is, if Israel succeeds in the Nuema plan to move them towards Jericho, then they would be able to extend the borders of Greater Jerusalem and, in effect, dissect the West Bank in half, definitely making it impossible for a two-state solution. So, if we could perhaps just support as well, who really need us, that would be fantastic. Now, lastly, I just want to address something to the moderate Jewish Zionist. A large portion of Israeli society is ignorant to the human rights violations which are occurring in the occupied Palestinian territories. They have no idea what's going on there. And I would like us to expose them to the truth. So I'm asking you, how would you feel about working together to raise awareness about what's actually going on in what's going on in Palestine and the occupied territories, if we could expose the truths to the Israeli community and to the Jewish people? How would you feel about that? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. We must finish this part. Before that, I want to give the chairperson, because he's about to leave, to make a few comments. And then after that, the few remaining hands here, for those who, because that portion I didn't cover, the few remaining hands. And then, because of time, I will give Mate to make a final response, and then Naim will also respond and then summarize, which is according to the program, so that we can be, because meanwhile,
we should really begin to focus on that, otherwise time is gone now. And just to give you a sense of what we have done, and perhaps, Dinewa, then you must make sure that all the delegates in here get a copy of the House resolutions. They are now House resolutions following the work we did on this matter. Taken to the House, and these resolutions were then adopted by the House. Now they are resolutions of Parliament. And I won't go through the whole thing, just around the practicalities, what we've resolved as a Parliament, what it is that we are going to do. We said we are going to intensify our solidarity efforts, supporting a just and peaceful lasting solution, including the strengthening of an independent and sovereign Palestinian state, which will help bring peace between Palestinians and Israelis and hopefully bring an end to the conflict. We're referring there really to institution building, helping the Palestinian institution building effort. Secondly, to become part of the worldwide movement, which includes civil society, supporting the campaigns led by the Palestinian people. I think it's important, Chair. These campaigns are led by the Palestinian people. They do not become our struggle. It doesn't become our struggle. They must lead, and we will support that struggle. And then we also said we will utilize our experience in reconciliation to help foster unity amongst Palestinians through interparliamentary cooperation, right? So using that parliamentary dimension to help foster that unity. We also said that we will continue to support efforts by our government to encourage an inclusive, peaceful process of a negotiated settlement. And then we said we will lead efforts to strengthen and coordinate interparliamentary solidarity efforts, globally. And within the Pan-African Parliament, as was alluded to, for instance, and elsewhere. And then lastly, we then said that we resolved to support all efforts to engage with all parties in Israel and Palestine to find a just, lasting, and peaceful resolution towards the settlement of the Palestinian question and to bring peace to the Middle East. Now, those are the resolutions we have taken as a parliament in terms of what it is that we want to do, right? The question I think that faces us here is, what is it that all of us can do as South Africa across the different sectors? I think, in my view, Chair, I think there's too much focus on what it is that government must do. I don't think we should be discussing here what it is that government must do. We had an example there, of the departmental official who said to us, look, this is what we are planning to do, amongst others. But what is it that we can collectively do to pursue this campaign? And I hope, Chair, by making that intervention, we will be able to move the debate along and not veer off into what I think are settled issues. They are settled. Thanks, Chair. I will have to rush. I have some...
Thanks very much, the real chairperson. No, thanks very much for the very useful intervention and the guidance, because I think, given time, we must try to focus our energies onto what is it that we want to do, the decisive impact that we want to make. I want to now request the last part, the hands from Ishmael to that other part. If there are hands, then we will come to summarize this side. Ishmael, you're the first. There's a hand behind you. 3, 4, 5 with job. Those are the last hands that we have. May we try as much as possible to be as quick as possible.
Thank you, Bongani. I'll be as brief as possible. I think I just wanted to expand a little bit on what Soraya was mentioning in terms of the peace process and the terminology that we use, two-state solution and the terminology peace process itself. These phrases were coined after the 1993 Oslo Accords. And it was an accepted settlement where 22% of historic Palestine was going to be given back to the Palestinians in a period of 5 years. And subsequently to that, in the last 20 years, it's only brought about a lot more misery. It's given more to the occupier and taken away from the occupied. My contention is that the peace process is a total sham. Israel keeps coming out with new ideas and new thoughts and new concepts that it brings into the pot, and that by delaying the whole process.
Thank you very much. Next speaker.
Came back from Israel and Palestine. I spent my birthday actually in Bethlehem, where I was taken by my Palestinian taxi driver to the... And one of the questions I want to ask is, because of that, UNRWA closed down 3... But that's another point. Rights of those refugees you refer to are respected in Area A, which is governed by the Palestinians.
There was one hand, and then Job will be the last.
The honor I've been to visit Jerusalem thrice. One on my Hajj and a Turkish woman here last week. She's a twice visiting from Syria, from Palestine. I really admire her. What are we doing as a grandmother? My mother would be raped or tortured, what they're doing to our people. There must be some...
Comrade Chair, just two or three points that but the possibility of providing those basic services to Palestinians to present us with a lot of excuses why we should not get food, and you continuously bomb our children, and on the basis that you then say to us, we must then provide services that you come and bomb with your F1s. That's a separate. The second, we need to answer ourselves, because if we all agree that we will not rejoice until Palestinians are free, the difficulty with this matter is that sometimes it's presented as a religious problem. In South Africa, you talk about Palestinians, a Jewish person thinks that we are attacking Jews because it doesn't want to hear anything that says Israel is wrong. Israel is a government that is killing innocent children. Israel is a government that continuously, unabated, do it with impunity to kill Palestinians, whether they are armed with one rifle or one bullet, they do it with a humiliation. I've gone to Gaza with very senior people in this town, in this country. Whether you call Brigadier Bam will tell you how we're humiliated by the Israelis. So I'm saying we should not pretend here that we must continue to be told how good it is. We cannot do that. In fact, I find it insulting because we were told at some point that blacks don't want sanctions because sanctions will hurt them. So you don't hurt the people that you seek to help. But it was the very same blacks that says, put sanction on the apartheid government. We are suffering we're in Israel. We are citizens being stripped because Israel wants to create a Zionist country there. What they meant about not, I would want to assume that what they meant. But now to be serious, during apartheid, we were worse off than, we will rather be subjugated rather than to be free. It's it in South Africa that the struggle and our support for Palestinians has nothing to do with them. That they have a duty themselves to raise their voices, makes them to be pariah in every... I stay in the community that is dominated Jewish, actually. That's where I stay. I understand what I'm talking about. I stay with them. I vote. You must be careful. It's Palestinian. Because in their mentality of how Israel has always argued is that anyone who's opposed to Israel is anti-Jewish. Anyone who does not want Israel the way it does things does not compete. But the struggle for Palestinians is not a religious struggle. It's a struggle for freedom. And so therefore all of us, we have come out of those labels. We're told Yes, now it's only then that Comrade Mandela was removed from the US list of terrorists. So then have a peace. We need to struggle to free Palestinians, but we need to struggle to free the Jewish community from the chains of Israel propaganda. We need to do that.
Two presenters summarize. Marty will start making afterwards. There is something that he wanted to talk about, SWIFT transactions activity. After the summary, when we are through, then I think it should just be for 5 minutes. Then we'll have. This one is that thanks very much for the cooperation. You've been a good in Palestine. I don't need to be a Jew to support justice in Palestine. I just need to be a human being with a moral conscience. All Jews, Arabs, people of dignity. The right thing is the right thing all over the world. It's not about color, it's not about race, it's not about gender, it's about the truth. We may try to delay freedom, but you can't stop freedom. That be free. I may not. History just happens to be made, because that's what will matter. And that is where South Africa's moral conscience will be tested. So I think that's so. But there's no religion that will claim religion. Every nation must be determined on the basis of the right for every human being to be equal. Israel, member of parliament, honorable member of parliament, including condemning the European Union and the United States. Because a facilitator is supposed to take responsibility for both sides. The other last issue that I think we must also talk about is fighting militantly on this question is a Jew, Steve Faulkner. The comrade from Samoa seated there knows him, and many comrades here knows him. He's a Jew. He always say, my being Jew is not a reason to be inhumane and not to have feelings for others. You can't tell me that Jews I have no feelings, are insensitive to the pain of others. I'm a Jew with a conscience, wants humanity, and the feeling to suffer the pain of others too. Fundamental question.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on one point, which, for instance, the HSRC that comes from South Africa and do something with it. Yes, are uniquely positioned in the world to do that. We have a special obligation. Everyone has an with a family, their house is just demolished, or accompany us with these people. Then they would look at us and they would say, they would look at me and they looked at the black over the world, but they were special obligation. So yes, the apartheid, what is defined in Israel as apartheid in terms of the South Africans, that with that, because the pain must stop. For how long? For how long must it continue? The plan is, the first one is how to end the pain as soon as do. What does the world do? How to maintain, to administer the territory in their behalf, on their behalf. And then the third thing is, cannot stop with the Palestinians and Israeli citizens on the support of the people, but also then especially the infrastructure that has been systematically destroyed over so many years.
To add to what was said earlier on, that I also find it quite insulting, only for black people and not for white people. We liberated white people in this country. We liberated black people and we liberated white people. This man was liberated by our struggle. You know, one human being is not more human than the other. So we care for the Member of Parliament. Yeah, so on the BDS issue, I mean, so what, in 2005 there was the BDS call. My criticism has been that none of these political parties have actually vocally, in three categories. Those within the BDS campaign has the wider BDS. So I think if we say, as a house, Chairperson, your that came out of this yeah.
Okay, thanks very much. Lesson that come out. But if there are things that other comrades
of what I entitled swift sanctions against Israeli banks. And I've yesterday received an endorsement by email from Omar Barghouti, who coordinates the BDS campaign. A special responsibility upon South Africans to, in a nutshell, so much on computer technology, which is driven by what is known as the SWIFT system in Belgium, occupation of the occupied territories. And the purpose of SWIFT sanctions is to end the serious security issue. SWIFT sanctions can also be reversed as soon as the Israeli to blacklist major if and when the peace process collapses by April. The European Union was a
Yeah, we go for tea break for 5 minutes. Yeah, 5 minutes, and we are back for the final process of the reports and everything, because unfortunately, there are times that bind the process.
They must come because we need to finish. Where's you as well? The ministers, leaders of government business. I'm not without much. Group 2, Mr. Chris. Can Mr. Chris come up and give us the report, please? Group 3, okay.
Yeah. No, thank you. A meaningful and unfettered treat. It was to appreciate the process that the parliamentary committee. We thought it was a good platform for us to make some of our own. The committee had also convened, in particular as it relates to the issue of Cuba, the blockade and the release of the Cuban Five. And therefore we agreed that trade for people-to-people relations, mechanisms including in Parliament for the end of the blockade, and all provinces that are participating in the Cuba South Africa in that program, because we think it's important for a whole range of reasons that we articulated. And those, Chairperson, were the important things that we believe is asserting the sovereignty and the dignity of Cuba and the Cuban Revolution.
We've noted that. I do believe that we have Group 3 that needs to
discuss that we raised during our discussions. We commend the ending Western Sahara. Point number 2, abuses committed against the people of Western Sahara. The Peace and Security Council of the AU must closely monitor violent acts. Taking from the Solidarity Conference must strongly condemn the human rights violation committed by Morocco. The wall of shame in all minds must be removed in that territory. The mandate of MINUSO must be expanded to include human rights violation and protecting the rights of the people of Western Sahara. The Parliament of the Republic of South Africa, in collaboration with the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, must work together in lobbying at multilateral forums for increased pressure to be exerted against Morocco. Countries that collaborate with Morocco in exploiting the natural resources of Western Sahara must be held accountable through a coordinated international effort using a variety of resources, including international law, boycotts, and solidarity campaigns. Monitoring and reporting of human rights violations committed against the people of Western Sahara must be continuous and consistent. We must accelerate public education on the issue of Western Sahara conflict. The African Solidarity Movement must be given the necessary support to ensure that issues related to Western Sahara are given necessary attention. A platform must be created for meaningful discussion to take place between Polisario and Morocco. All detainees and political prisoners must be released unconditionally. The blockade on media must be condemned and removed. Chair, this is what the Group 3 had discussed. If anyone from the group would like to add, I would love to invite them to add from what we have read.
There's a request for any additions from the committee, from the meetings. If there's any, please put up your hand. If there's none, then we proceed to listen to the next report from Mr. Gina. Thank you, Mr. Gina.
Thank you, Chairperson. Our group discussed the Palestinian situation under the theme Intensifying Solidarity with the Palestinian Struggle for Self-Determination. We had lots of discussion around this, but in the report that I'm going to present, I'm only going to present what came out as concrete proposals or suggestions for how such solidarity might be intensified. We were, after much of our debate, brought into line by the Portfolio Committee Chairperson that this is actually what our focus should be and not a kind of broad discussion. So I'm going to go through these points in no particular order of importance or any other order. Number one, that the South African government should play a role and take upon as its responsibility to support and to engage in Palestinian reconciliation efforts. We got a report from someone from the Department of International Relations and Cooperation that in fact this is on the agenda of the government for this year. Number two, that South Africa must act according to its legal obligations as a signatory to the Rome Statute to set up a special court to deal with war crimes, to expeditiously deal with the Gaza docket that is sitting with the National Prosecuting Authority, and to deal with the question of South Africans who serve in the Israeli Defense Force. Number three, that the Human Sciences Research Council report called Colonialism, Occupation and Apartheid, that the report which found Israel guilty of the crime of apartheid should be adopted by Parliament and by the government, and must be referred by the government to international bodies including the ICC, the United Nations and the African Union. Number four, that South Africa has a legal obligation to stop financial transactions with Israeli settlement companies, with banks that deal with Israeli settlements and companies that are involved in the settlements as a consequence of international law, which deems that all these settlements are illegal. Number five, on the global arena for South Africa to lobby for the financial and other support of the Palestinian people for socio-economic development after the end of occupation. Number six, as a concrete act of solidarity for South Africa to support Palestinian students and grant a number of scholarships to Palestinian students wishing to study in South Africa. Okay, the numbering's gone off here, but number seven, entrance into South Africa for Palestinians must be, and visa requirements must be made easier. Number eight, Palestinian health system must be supported in the West Bank, in Gaza, and in various refugee camps. Sorry, I should have said at the beginning that we discussed these measures in terms of three levels. A role that can be played by South African civil society, South African government, and the South African Parliament. And so you'll see that some of these refer to one or other, and some to more than one. Number nine, that this conference supports the Robben Island Declaration for the freedom of Marwan Barghouti and all Palestinian political prisoners, and will campaign in this regard. Number 10, that we support the Palestinian-led call for boycott, divestment, and sanctions issued by the majority of Palestinian civil society and political organizations. This includes the complete military, financial, and political sanctions against Israel until it complies with all applicable United Nations resolutions and international law and ends its occupation of Palestinian territory. Number 11, that our government needs to table these at the African Union and the United Nations. Number 12, all South African political parties should clearly, or that we call on all South African political parties to clearly communicate their stance on the plight of the Palestinian people and to make it timelessly known in the build-up to the 2014 elections. Thank you, Comrade Fatima. Number 13, that we should encourage witness and solidarity visits